All right, guys, we are back with another Seeing Through Gebser video. We are wrapping up our discussion on the fourth dimension. And then next week we'll be getting into temporics, and then the week after that we will be diving in, my friend. Now, we already kind of are in the water. We're like in that midpoint of the pool between the shallow end and the deep end. We're kind of at that midpoint here. So there are deeper waters to explore. Now, last week, of course, I gave you guys a little homework assignment. The question was, what are the effects of incorporating or integrating time as the fourth dimension, but this integration of time is the exclusive mental time? So what do you think are some of the effects of that? Let me know in the comments if you got it right. No problem if you got it wrong. But it should be fun. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Quote, quoting Gebser, "The conception of a fourth dimension which proceeds from Riemann's geometry, on the other hand, which Einstein introduced in a generalized form into physics, is a mental conception." So, of course, last week we talked about the magic structures application of the fourth dimension with, I think it was Matterlink, a sort of cringe regression to seances and all this magical stuff. And then we had the mythical 2D flat circle, polar complementarity with Mach, which was better because he transcended the pure perspectivity. He got out of the pure confines of space and instead started thinking in terms of energy. Now, that's great, but unfortunately that energy circled or was directed in the 2D flat circle. That's obviously a regression to the mythical structure. I apologize if I sound a little stuffed. It's because I am. There it is defined as time and employed as a continuum for calculation as a fourth dimension of space, of curved space. Since the mathematical formulation and unification of the heterogeneous elements of time and space were successful only at the expense of time, time was subjected to a further spatialization for physical research. Oh, interesting. The successful incorporation of time as a fourth dimension into three-dimensional space realized the union of space and time, or space-time unity, which led to practical results, notably in nuclear physics. It is perhaps symptomatic that this inclusion of a dividing principle one which is dynamic and energetic, transforms space into a continuum. Why is that interesting? So, of course, a continuum, that's the understanding of the mental structure. Remember the Tracy Lawrence song, "Time marches on, time marches on, time is marching on." We have the continuous unfolding external duration in which each moment is equal to the one that preceded it and the one that will proceed it, and it all just flows, kind of like a sentence. Ordered, duration, continuous, external. So it's interesting that when you incorporate time in the fourth dimension, it, of course, in accordance with the rational understanding of time, even the space-time unity in the fourth dimension is going to take on this continuum idea. It is not. There is no continuum. Quantum mechanics destroys that. Boom, 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 boom. Each moment is different. Each moment is unique. We will get into that in the next chapter. But there is yet a further symptom which underscores our definition of time as the preeminent divider in which destruction and sundering are inherent. This is important. The structuration of the atom, or rather its destruction by nuclear fission, and the destruction of the spatial cohesion of matter that were made possible by Einstein's formulas. So it was Einstein's formulas, it was Einstein's integration of time, that is 3D time, not proper time, the rationalist version of time, as the fourth dimension, and now what do we get? We have space. Remember, people. God damn, I just got stuffy all of a sudden. What the hell is up? Of course, the mental structure was born from space, objectified space, perspectivity. Space, obviously, is dividing, right? We've all covered this in the mental structure. We've all got this. Everything spatial has a limit. So when you continue to divide, and you divide past that limit, you will destroy space, as evidenced by the creation of the nuclear bomb and its destruction. So, beautiful. It is consistent and obvious that by establishing mental time, itself divisive and disjunctive, as the fourth component of a fourth-dimensional continuum, the result would be the invention of the atom bomb and similar weapons of destruction. This continuum has here a strictly negative effect, which leads to a no longer controllable dissolution. So that's another thing. I can't remember if we touched upon it already or we're going to touch upon it. But remember, we have control over things during their germinal phase. So right in their incipient point, right in that moment, remember, moments are not equal. When things are just coming about, now we have control. If you've seen the movie Poor Things, I think Yorgos non-consciously touches on this. So what happens is Emma Stone's character has the body of a grown woman, of Emma Stone, but she has the brain of like a 5-year-old child, and I think like a mentally handicapped 5-year-old child. So Willem Dafoe, this creator of this person, if you will, he is viewed as immediately as this sort of evil inventor type, this Goebbels type, this Frankenstein type. He's a bad guy because he's playing God with eugenics, and he's playing this weird game, and he's playing this sick game. And then what happens in the film, which is overrated as hell, by the way, it's like bottom tier Yorgos. I cannot believe, not poorly made, technically well made. I love Emma Stone. Emma Stone's a great actress. Love Willem Dafoe, but drop it. So what happens is, as she frees herself from the apparently oppressive ruling of Willem Dafoe's character, she really just ends up being exploited sexually by a bunch of different men, and no one really cares about her. They kind of just view her as an object. So, and then at the end, Willem Dafoe you kind of realize that no, Willem Dafoe actually did care about this woman. He knew what he was doing. He was trying his best, and he knew not to let her out into society because she was not ready. It was not the time for her to be let out to society. So I think that illustrates the point. When things are in their beginning phase, we have control over these things. But when things break off and all of a sudden all these machines and technologies we've created have overwhelmed us, now we're screwed. Our mode of observation, this is funny. Our mode of observation will undoubtedly cause annoyance and irritation in some quarters, and the tendency will be to deny its relevance to the subject under consideration. I love when Gebser does this. He takes like these tiny little shots. You can tell that when he's giving his ideas, they're like, this isn't relevant to the subject under consideration. He's like, no, this is the subject under consideration. We will deal with the irrelevance of such an objection shortly. Ooh. But first, we should like to make a further observation about the rationalistic conception of the fourth-dimensional continuum in order to underscore its complexity. The French scholar Paul Langevin has written the most fitting statement of this. Quote, "Physics had at its indispensable arena Euclidean space in which absolute time prevailed. The new conception of relativity is vastly different, a fusion of geometry and physics, which renders the existence of absolute time in absolute space impossible." So, no, there is, of course, no absolute time. We've known that since Einstein. And there's no real absolute space either, because we've known that since non-Euclidean geometry. Space isn't an absolute backdrop. It's curved. There's no flat space. It's all curved. It appears flat to us, just like the Earth when I'm walking down the street. It appears flat, but it's curved. So no, it's not an absolute space. It's kind of a relative space. This summary remark as to the difference between the Euclidean and the non-Euclidean conception is intriguing for two reasons. First, it demonstrates that a rational description can be adequate for the most part. And second, it refers us to the magic component inherent in the concept of relativity. This is important. We have referred to this previously in our discussion of Einstein's space-time unity, as well as to its modification by the mythical complementary principle. Langevin's eminently rational formula clearly shows that the concept of a four-dimensional space does not exclude a dualistic interpretation, which must inevitably choose between only two alternatives whenever it is unable to achieve a synthesis. The alternatives here are the concept of an unconditional absolute and the concept of the conditional relative. The unity postulate, which has by nature a magic accentuation, is coupled with the postulate of the relativity of events. The conception of a four-dimensional curved space, therefore, is not one of integrality and integration, but one which affects a unity and a relativization. This relativization is the second magic component, for the decisive role is played by the interrelationships of individual spatial and temporal points, or space-time quantities, which, to the extent that they are measurable, represent a rational form of a magic point-like relationship. So this is some brilliant stuff. So essentially what he's saying is, what Einstein has ultimately done here, he's found an incredibly brilliant, rational way of presenting magical structure phenomena. That's really what he's done. So, and you can tell it's what he's done because I'm going to stop using this, by the way. He calls it space-time unity. I'm going to drop that. I'm going to call it space-time integration from now on. Unity, of course, signals the magic structure where everything was unified and emanated magical forces. That's unity. That's not integration. Unity. That's number one. Number two, the relativization. Remember with the magic structure. My phone and my Post-it notes here are all one. They're all world. There is no distinction between them. And if there is no distinction between them, then there is no separate valuation of the two things. One cannot be better or worse if they are both equal, if they're all the same. There you go. There's the relativization. And that's kind of what you get with this idea of space-time unity where everything's just relative. So, again, he's found an incredibly intelligent and rational way of presenting the magic consciousness structure. And now also, and as an additional point, we should remind you guys, remember, there's an affinity between the mental structure and the magic structure. So it actually does make some sense that he would do this because the preceding discovery that birthed the magic structure, that birthed the mental structure, was of course external. Of course, in the magic, it was the world, just kind of nature, just magical world. And then, of course, with the mental structure, it was space, objectified space and perspectivity. So you're seeing the direct connection between the magic structure and the mental structure. I'm not saying Einstein isn't a brilliant guy. You could put me on the earth for like 10,000 years and I would never come up with what he did. Nonetheless, he didn't quite get it. He represented a good improvement, but didn't quite get there. This inquiry into the rationalistic concept of a fourth dimension, which uses the criterion of the consciousness structure on which the concept is based, permits the following conclusions. The introduction of the mental time mode, which partitions and measures time into the geometric physical image of world as a fourth dimension, has been successful. So when he says that, he's not saying the actual integration of actual time, 4D time. That's not what he's talking about. He's saying the integration of 3D mental time has been successful if you want to view it from that point. The previous three-dimensional space, that is, the hetero-valid mental conception of the world, has been superseded, and the supersession presents itself as an expansion of that conception of world since it has been achieved by the spatialization of time. Expansion of that conception of world. I think you know what I'm going to say after this paragraph. Thus, it is only an apparent supersession. Maybe I even won't say it, because Gebser's just going to say it for me, and he's going to put it way more beautifully than I will. Thus, it is only an apparent supersession, or more appropriately, an initial step toward a genuine supersession which would have to accommodate two heretofore unattainable demands. That four-dimensionality should have a reality not only in the special fields of geometry and physics, but should be efficacious and concrete in all aspects and areas of life and thought. And two, that for its integral effectuality, the merely partitioning element time must be intensified by an all-encompassing temporal concretion, even when time is manipulated as a relative and not absolute quantity or dimension. So, no, you have integrated one mode of time and it is a deficient one. What we need is a correspondingly complementary, more all-encompassing understanding of time, where we have all the different time forms, sudden burst, rhythm, meter, any different tempo, all this different stuff. We have to understand time as an integrating medium, and we also have to understand time as an intensity, and also employ the other modes of time that are that correspond to the different structures. So we can employ magical timelessness, we can employ mythical temporicity, we can employ mental time. So all that stuff I just mentioned, not just one or the other, but all of it, that's what we need, not this ridiculous nonsense. Though it is an improvement, it should be respected. I still think Einstein's a genius. Don't think I'm I think he's a moron or anything like that. The introduction of mere time into the traditional concept of space will bring about only a partial supersession. That's another thing. So when he says a partial supersession, that's exactly right. You've kind of incorporated time, but not really. It's like you finally learned how to play soccer, but you're only using your weak foot exclusively. It's like, no, there's more here. You can use the other foot, your strong foot. You can use your head, right? You can use your chest, your knee if you need to. Hell, if you're really bad like me, you just throw the ball in and cry and stomp off when your parents yell at you. So what he's talking about is a supersession, or more appropriately, an expansion of the conception of world. This is the problem with it. This is where a lot of rationalists, they get stuck. They think they've made the leap into 4D, But they really haven't. At best, they've integrated mere clock time, rational time. So what they've done is they've expanded space. It's not bad, it's not terrible, but you need to understand time as an intensity, time as an integrating medium. Will bring about only a partial supersession. And yet a supersession tantamount to a liberation must be achieved, not merely a spatial expansion which leads to spatial destruction. Beautiful. Three-dimensional space cannot be destroyed by a four-dimensional continuum any more than two-dimensional surface can be destroyed by three-dimensional space. The liberation from the world of one less dimension in any given instance is principally a liberation from the exclusive validity of the lesser dimension structures. Viewed in these terms, the adaptation by rational science of the concept of a fourth dimension that employs a time concept, which is no longer absolute but relative, is an initial point of departure toward a fourth-dimensional consciousness of integrality and aperspectivity. It remains for us to consider what form this intensified modality of time will necessarily take to guarantee the consolidation of this consciousness and to prevent it from running aground in a merely dynamicized and expanded spatial concept. Before we do so, we would only point out that our interpretation of the physical geometrical conception of Einstein's fourth dimension contains definite indications of a more general validity. So like I said earlier, it is better than the other ones. It is better because at least we are being somewhat rational here, right? I mean, obviously Einstein was a brilliant man. He knows what what it means to be rational. He knows what he's talking about. It is distinguished by a lack of visuality. This is the reason why, what I'm about to list out, is the reason why Einstein's theory is better than Mach's, better than Maeterlinck's, better than the other guys. It is distinguished by a lack of visuality, which is not to be confused with abstractness. It cannot be realized via mere mental conceptualization, and it therefore contains the seeds of a hitherto unknown mode of realization unconnected with the restrictions of three-dimensional conceptualization. So, because it's invisible, though not abstract, of course, abstract belonging to the mental structure, because it cannot be realized via mental conception, so it's invisible and can't be realized through rationality, and yet we have an understanding of it other ways. So clearly, we have shown, or through solving this problem here, we have essentially discovered a new structure, a new way of relating objects in the world to each other. In this case, it's seeing through the projections you're just describing. So that's why it's superior than the other ones, because it does present an unknown mode of realization, whereas Mach and Maeterlinck, they provided ones we've already seen before, not only that, and two, ones that are now deficient. We have circumscribed this new mode of realization with the term virition, or A-waring. That's A-W-A-R-I-N-G. The removal of space and time from the mental conception of absoluteness affords the possibility of concretizing those now relativized quantities, particularly the quantity time. We must be aware at the outset of the magic restriction of this relativization and consider that any necessary integration must be preceded by concretion. I love this. This concretion can never be fulfilled with respect to the absolute, but, in mental terms, only with respect to the relative. The concept of the four-dimensional continuum as curved space thus holds the incipient possibility of realizing the integrum, the four-dimensional transparent sphere in motion, and that is, of course, I believe we touched last week's video, the three-dimensional transparent moving, that's a key point, it must be moving, sphere. That is the symbol for the integral structure. The sphere integrates and connects the internal with the external. And the reason why it's a sphere is because everything closes in on each other, right? So if I'm at work and maybe I'm in like a service industry and I'm not, technically I'm supposed to be cut around 8, right? But who knows, depending on what it is. It could be 7, it could be 9, it could be depending on time as a quality, So let's say I get back at 8 and we're busy. So I was expecting to get off work, and now and now I have to seat 3 more people or whatever I'm doing. So the reason you're upset right now is because your conception of the future did not align with how it manifested once the time came, right? So if your future really was just this distant thing that was, you're always like swimming towards it, running towards it, but you can never actually get it. How in the world is it affecting you right now, right? It's not that it's this line going off and it's always ahead of you. Like, this is the future, this is you. And you're always moving together, always moving together. No, you're sat in the center. This is the future. And it goes, and it goes, and it goes, and then it curves up, and it comes back. It folds in on itself with the sphere. This is why past, present, and future are all contained in the present. The sphere closes in. It allows memories of the past to reemerge, and it allows conceptions of the future to kind of drag you forward so you can actualize them. And when you mentioned concretion, it's very important, okay? Because I think I made this point the other day. Even the most idiot friend you know, or the biggest idiot you know, understands rationality, understands space on a basic level, on like almost an automatic level. He knows, even if just very basic things, like, you know, like I'm kind of blanking on examples, but that space has become concretized. If you tell him to go to the car, he'll go to the car. You know what I mean? He's not just going to do irrational nonsense. If you tell him it's time for you to go home, he knows what home means. He knows what to go home. He can understand it, even if he's an idiot. All right, trust me. There are some idiots in this world. They seem to be attracted to me. Not my girlfriend. I didn't mean it like that. My girlfriend is more intelligent. That's not what I meant. I just meant like people in my life. There's morons. Okay. My girlfriend's very intelligent. That's not what I meant. Okay. Because of the importance of these matters, we do not hesitate to summarize in slightly different terms what we have just discussed. This is the great thing about Gebser. He will rephrase it for clarity and transparency. It reminds me of the Nietzsche quote, where it was, that who knows he is a genius, those who know they are a genius strives for, God damn it, what is wrong with me? Hold on. Those who know they are profound strive for clarity. Those who want to seem profound to the crowd strive for obscurity. Gebser strives for clarity. Gebser knows exactly what he's talking about. Einstein's theory of relativity constructed a unity of space and time that can be formulated, at least in mathematical terms. So that is what Einstein did. He's unified, emphasis on the magic, space and time, and that unification can be presented in mathematical formulas. If you want it very simple, that is what he did. It's beautiful. But it had to be conceived of in terms of constant decay and simultaneous renewal, paving the way for a process of expansion, as we might say, in consequence of the dividing capacity of the heterogeneous quantity of time. So scientifically, what Gebser is saying is, when you integrate the dividing time, the 3D rational time, as the fourth dimension, this is what you get. You get this perpetual decay and renewal, and it always happens. And what it does, it expands and expands, and it divides. Hello, Stephen Hawking. The process of expansion is a frenzied rush, pushing ever outward the boundaries of the microcosm as well as the macrocosm, dissolving, indeed destroying, and exploding rather than overcoming the spatial structure. So this process, this frenzied process of perpetual renewal and decay, simultaneously active and present, unfortunately it destroys space. It just kind of is what it is. We know why, because you've integrated the wrong time. The specter of mere expansion and overstepped boundaries inflates our spatial world not only in a physical but also in a psychological sense. We are constantly hearing of the expansion of consciousness. Even the conception of the expansion of the universe at this very moment, the notion that the universe is part of a process of expansion, can be traced to the same roots as the other examples cited. So that's Stephen Hawking, right? This idea of the world is this ever-inflating balloon. It's a very shallow, rationalist accounting of the world. John helped me understand this. There is a spiritual other side, whether you like it or not, whether you respect it or not, whether you think you're too good for it or not. What we see in the physical cosmos, that's a part of it. That's what we can understand through science. Don't worry. The deceptive shrinkage of time and the equally deceptive quote-unquote conquest of space, exemplified by our transformed means of rapid transportation, are the negative caricatures of a misunderstood and misapplied value. So this is why I say we can tell that we've misapplied time. We can tell that we have not properly integrated time, actual time, because our understanding of time, we only create machines with any understanding of time in mind so we can conquer space. That's it. So we make airplanes so we can conquer space more quickly, the temporal unfolding, than we would without it. It's not terrible. I like airplanes. I think they're cool, but it is a misapplied value. You're misunderstanding what time is. That value is, of course, rational time, ever divisive and destructive like dice, D-A-I-S. Remember, that's the etymological root of rationality, and that means demonic. The demonic equals divisive principle. A principle which, because of its deficient mental and unrecognized magic treatment, has most likely increased today in virulence. So, a lot of rationalism. It's only gotten worse. On the other hand, we should not fail to observe that in this conception of a four-dimensional continuum, the three structural and consciousness-forming components of the magic, mythical, and mental structures are present, even though in deficient form. The magic component is recognizable in the postulates of space-time, unity, and relativity. We've already kind of talked about that. It's pretty crazy how all these conceptions are present, even in Einstein's. And the fact that Gebser can notice this is brilliant. The mythical component is visible in the correlated complementarity principle, which equates mass and energy, particle and wave, as polar phenomena. Remember, that's Niels Bohr. Wave energy is both wave and corpuscle at the same time. There are polar complements. You can't have one without the other. You can't do one or the other. That's the mistake. Niels Bohr, we talked about that earlier in the series, way earlier in the series, but that's what he's referencing. And then the mental component is expressed by the spatialization of time and its fixed geometrical form as the fourth dimension. That one's kind of obvious. Only the space-free, time-free component is lacking, and it will remain so until the error is perceived of mistakenly treating the fourth dimension as measurable rather than integrative and transparent time. Our relation of space and time to and inter one another, as provided by the theory of relativity, is one where time curves space and space measures time. This makes of time a measured comparative component, as in Einstein's space-time model of the scale, that must be superseded. True time does not curve space. It is open and open space through its capacity of rendering it transparent, and thereby supersedes nihilistic emptiness, reattaining openness and an intensified consciousness structure spoken of in part 1 of our inquiry. So I think when you say time's open component or characteristic is that literally everything in the spatial world, I don't care if it's an atom, I don't care if it's a nuclear bomb, I don't care if it's an elephant, I don't care if it's anything. You listening to my words right now is unfolding according to some sort of temporal sequence. This temporal sequence is what allows the spatial object to not only exist, manifest, but also it sort of offers it meaning and order. It solidifies its ontological status and validity. So I think that's what he's talking about. So no, time does not curve space. Time simply allows space to come into being and integrates that space with everything else in the world. All right. We are not presenting here specialized scientific contributions which examine phenomena from a partial sector in a sectarian or dissecting manner. We are attempting to encompass the phenomena as a whole from the inherent living structural laws in their manifestation. So that's, by the way, remember that objection that the things weren't relative to the study under consideration or whatever? That's what he's talking about. No, it is relevant. I think what he's saying is it's more relevant than you even realize. It's not that it's not relevant. It is the most relevant thing, okay? Because what you're saying is a part, and it's a part of a whole, and I'm now connecting the whole. So yes, it is relevant. Don't let these people fool you. When we interpret the irrational number t equals the square root of -1, for example, with emphasis on the irrational, on the mythical magic aspect rather than the concept of number, as an approximation of a mathematically interpreted and applicable value, our standpoint is decisive. We are approaching the rational number from a consciousness structure, not from a specialized science. Here lies in the full relevance of our mode of observation. So this is the really cool thing. This is actually kind of a spatial enrichment aspect, but it's still cool nonetheless. You can analyze... Remember, in integral structure, the pre-rational, irrational, and rational are always present, right? They're always present, they're always efficacious, they're always interplaying with one another. So it kind of follows, for the most part, maybe not in literally every situation, but in a lot of situations, you will be able to go out and kind of, if you know what you're looking for, if you know the ins and outs of the mythical structure, if you know the ins and outs of the magic structure, you can just pick it apart and be like, oh, that's relativity, that's magic structure. Just go back and look, it's fun. Oh, these next couple paragraphs are good. For all you philosophers out there, I want you to listen up very carefully. This is very important. All right? I'll get there. The value of this mode of inquiry does not diminish the claims of mathematics, say, of being the exact and fundamental science among the sciences. See, we're not trying to necessarily destroy all things rational. Calm down, rationalists. We are not usurping the concepts it has formulated, but are interpreting them with respect to their general validity. Since we do not apply them sectorially, the claims of mathematics is valid and relevant only to the extent that we acknowledge the basic significance and efficacy of the magic structure, to which mathematics, this fundamental branch of science, must be assigned for the various other consciousness structures. So why in the world would Gebser say that mathematics belongs to the magic structure? Let's find out why. It's actually a shockingly simple answer. For the various other consciousness structures. For it does not matter whether we are speaking of mathematics or of the magic structure, and we must remember that pure mathematics is preeminently a product of this consciousness structure, since the procedure of equating is fundamental to both. I'm going to repeat for emphasis. For it does not matter whether we are speaking of mathematics or of the magic structure, since the procedure of equating is fundamental to both. Remember earlier, 10 minutes ago, when I talked about the magic structure, this, my little thing here, is equal to my phone, which is equal to my mouse, which is equal to my highlighters. We are equating. We are equating. This equating is the exact same equating that mathematics does. So, actually, I'll get there. It is only the mental rational procedure in mathematics that hypostasizes the point-like postulates, which constitute the system of relationships in the magic structure into absolutes, that deludes most mathematicians about the actual and workable roots of their discipline. Moreover, it is this procedure which raises the queen of the sciences to the level of an absolute, a process of absolutizing which befell other queens. So, very big. Bertrand Russells of the world, analytic philosophers of the world, philosophers of mathematics, you will never, ever, when he says hypostasize, that means rationally ground. You will never, ever, 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 ever be able to rationally ground or ground your numbers, because the only thing that can be grounded comes from the rational structure, the mental structure, and as we just explained, mathematics is the equating. Remember with mathematics, the magic structure, all the points are being equated? That's math. You will never, ever, 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 ever be able to ground your numbers, which is to say, you will never be able to say, well, what about 4? What is the 4-ness? Why is 4 4? Like, what about 4 makes it 4? What is the 4-ness that makes it 4? You're never going to find it. You're never going to find it. I don't know what to say. And philosophers, you need to stop bullying mathematicians and going up there and being like, you guys have never been able to ground your... Yeah, neither of you. Neither of you. You've never been able to ground anything, okay? Because Gebser comes in and deconstructs all of you like it's nothing. So stop bullying mathematicians. Let them do their thing. And very simple. Math is a product of the magic structure. It is. Obviously, there's some mental rational stuff in there, obviously. But the equating comes out of the magic structure. You will never be able to hypostasize or ground numbers or do any of that stuff, okay? So do with that what you will, philosophers. I love you guys more than life itself, but stop wasting your time. It's not going to happen. All right, I'm going to skip a couple paragraphs. Summarizing, then, the results of our inquiry into the adaptations by the various disciplines of a concept of the fourth dimension, we might say that the attempt of the Spiritists is inadequate, since their adaptation results merely in a reinvigorated timelessness, magic structure. The attempt of the Psychist is equally inadequate, for it's a reinvigoration of temporicity, mythical structure. The adaptation of rationalists, on the other hand, is nearly adequate, even though the fourth dimension is for them still conceptualized chronological time and in admittedly deabsolutized relative form. So it's better, but not great. Let us here note as a final result of our inquiry that none of the previous definitions or adaptations of the fourth dimension is sufficient to enable the mutation from which this concept has germinated to achieve the full realization of its efficacy. Until now, the attempts with the fourth dimension have all been inadequate and are comparable to those made with the third dimension during the 150 years between Petrarch and Leonardo da Vinci. The inadequacy of these latter attempts is evident in their false, that is, reversed, inverted, and foreshortened perspectivization, and is equally recognizable in the cave frescoes of Ajanta, India, from the 5th century AD, which, interestingly, were not brought to full perspective but left in a form merely suggestive of perspective. So, very important, because some people, they like to diminish or undermine the validity of quantum mechanics and quantum logic, because when using quantum mechanics in the real world, like out here, there's not a ton of great stuff so far. Two big reasons. One, as Gebser just said, this exact same thing happened with the discovery of space, which led to the mental structure. From Petrarch to Da Vinci. Remember, it was Da Vinci that hypothesized the mental structure. He was the one who figured out perspective. Petrarch did not. Petrarch had imaginary space up here. It had to be actualized and concretized, which Da Vinci would do. So in that 150-year span, if you go back and look, as Gebser just said, you are going to see a lot of failed attempts at perspectivity. It's going to be inverted. It's going to be wrong. It's going to be relative. The point is, adapting to these new structures is very difficult, all right? It's very difficult. It just is. I don't know what to tell you. So that's point number one. Inherently, you're going to have these problems. Even if it was in a vacuum, which leads us to point number two, it's not in a vacuum. We're doing this. Our adaptation of quantum mechanics now is being held back or constrained by our rationalist faculties. Sometimes I think even the scientists don't understand what they've done, because they're like, there's this intangible attracting force that binds energy and material. Yeah, that's time. Unfortunately, in fairness to them, they have to prove it mathematically and scientifically, so I'm not trying to beat them up. So number one, it's always going to be difficult. I just don't know what to tell you. It is what it is. Even in a vacuum, it's going to be difficult. Number two, it's not in a vacuum. We're in a rationalist society where we have all these energies, all this different stuff. And yeah, so compounded, this inherent difficulty is the fact that we're fighting against, imagine being rational. Take Marcus Aurelius for the first time. If you've read the Meditations, he'll write in there, he'll say something like, be careful. You are rational. They are not. It takes work to be rational. You put in the work. He obviously puts it a little more eloquently, but that's the whole point. The entire point of the Meditations, in my opinion, is a struggle for the mental consciousness structure to rigidify itself, solidify itself, and enact some sort of order and restraint and control over the other structures. I think that's really what actually, I might make a video about that. Maybe. But yeah, so those are two big problems. Of what form, then, is the fourth dimension to be? This is the last question which remains to be answered. What form is it to take if it has to do with time but cannot be one of the previous forms of time? Neither timelessness, nor temporicity, nor time itself. And what shall its form be if it is to be integrative? As an integrative form, it would supersede space and time, since space is based on time, just as surface is based on temporicity, and the spaceless point on timelessness. The fourth dimension, therefore, must be free from these forms of time. Freedom from space presupposes freedom from time. It is this freedom from time that is the fourth dimension. Repeat for emphasis. I'm going to repeat it twice. It is this freedom from time that is the fourth dimension. Last time. It is this freedom from time that is the fourth dimension. The achronon, not chronon, as in chronos, as in chronological. That's mental stuff. Achronon, space-free, time-free. We can employ all different modes of thought. We can understand all different modes of thought. We recognize all different modes of thought, and we recognize their integrative ability. It is this freedom from time which must be realized. Without freedom from time, an effectual supersession of the spatial confinement of the three-dimensionality is not possible. And we reiterate, the realization of this time freedom must occur by the concretion, not merely by the relativization of time. Time must first become concrete and conscious in all its forms. Something can be superseded and integrated only when concretized. The attempt at the concretion of time, which leads to time freedom, is temporix. So the attempt at the concretion of time, which leads to time freedom, is temporics. So that's what we're going to be discussing next week, and then everything after that. So anytime we get into those natural sciences, when we get into the sciences of the mind, when we get into the arts, that's really what we're going to be analyzing. Temporics, the attempt at concretion of time which leads to time freedom. That's what we're going to be analyzing for the rest of this book. In the following chapters, we shall examine these four-dimensional attempts and initial manifestations which are appearing in all areas of human inquiry. And while observing these aperspectival four-dimensional manifestations, we will unavoidably have to recall their location and their movement, their where and how. We must not, in other words, lose sight of the capacity of man to be the agent of the mutational event. As we have seen, this capacity is creativity, the remarkable endowment of man with which he can manifest the consciousness integrating and consciousness constituting processes. We must, to use a metaphorical expression, become acquainted with the well springs from which we draw our sustenance. Woo! Beautiful. God, I love it. God, so good. Let's see. We have also seen that this new dimension must be time freedom, and in view of the skipping a little bit, and in view of the importance of this concept, we wish in conclusion to venture a definition of the nature of time freedom or achronicity. However, since mere definition, in this case the conceptual delimitation of a term whose basic characteristic is freedom from temporal and spatial boundaries, that is, open, would be incongruent, we shall be content to approach the essence of this term by posing and answering three questions. These three questions are: what is time freedom? To what extent can it be realized? And in what sense is it the fourth dimension? Number one, what is time freedom? Time freedom is the conscious form of archaic, original pretemporality. Very simple. What is time freedom? Is the conscious form of archaic, original pretemporality. So essentially, you're almost attaining the consciousness of origin, even before timelessness, even before temporacy, even before mental structure. You are attaining. Origin has that freedom to employ or mutate these forms of time whenever he wants, or I say he, whenever it wants. So do we now. Pretty cool. Number two, to what extent can it be realized? Time freedom can be realized by achieving each of the previous time mutations from archaic pretemporality, by granting to magic timelessness, mythical temporicity, and mental conceptual temporality their integral efficacy, and by living them in accord with the strength of their degree of consciousness, we are able to bring about this realization. The concretion of the previous three exfoliations of original pretemporality instantaneously opens for us pre-conscious timelessness. So it really is beautiful. It's really that simple. Concretize magical timelessness, concretize mythical temporicity, and not only that, not only should you consciously employ them, but also recognize how they're already present. Also recognize how they're already effective in you. Once you do that, you will recognize that they have an integrative functioning too. So once that happens, you're good, more or less. I would argue, I mean, we're obviously going to get more into this in the book. Even if you just stop right now, you'd have a better understanding. Even just a conscious understanding of mythical temporicity, magical timelessness, things like rhythm, meter, suddenness, whatever. I think you're already a trillion miles ahead of everyone else, but it's always good to be more. As such, time freedom is not only the quintessence of time, as we have stated earlier, but also the conscious quintessence of all previous temporal forms. Their becoming conscious, in itself a process of concretion, is also a liberation from all of these time forms. So a liberation from, we'll say, the mental structure, imposition of time, well, that only comes about once you're consciously aware of these other time forms. So we're already off to a good start because you guys are already off. You already know about this. We've already covered this in the magic mythical structure, so we're good. Don't be intimidated. That's what I'm saying. Everything becomes present, concrete, and thus integrable present. But this time implies that pre-conscious origin becomes conscious present, that each and every time form basic to the 1, 2, and 3-dimensional world is integrated and thereby superseded. This also means that we perceive the world in its foundations and are not just exclusively bound to its vital, experiential, and conceptual forms. To adduce just one example, we no longer observe the world only from a fixed perspective, but perceive it as aperspectival and unfixed. So from a fixed perspective, we would say, nope, it's only the mental time, only the mythical time, only the magic time. And aperspectival which is to say, without perspective, renders us the ability, or affords us the ability, to render this transparent. And in doing so, we recognize that all these time forms are perpetually present. They're all simultaneously active, and they can all be employed consciously. Anyone conscious of the foundations cannot be perplexed or bewildered by the variety, transitoriness, or fixity inherent in the respective forms. Anyone able to realize and thus concretize the three previously basic temporal forms already consciously stands in four-dimensionality. Repeat for emphasis. Anyone able to realize and thus concretize the three previously basic temporal forms already consciously stands in four-dimensionality. You are consciously already in four-dimensionality. Now it is our job to sort of entrench you in there. Let's rigidify your place in four-dimensionality. Let's keep it there and make sure you don't lapse back into 3D rationalism. Okay, so that was number 2. And then number 3 is, and in what sense it is the fourth dimension. So we know what time freedom means. Of course, it is the conscious form of archaic original pretemporality. We know what extent it can be realized. We just talked about that. So now, how do we know it's the fourth dimension? Time freedom is the fourth dimension because it constitutes and unlocks the four-dimensionality outlined above. Yep. In, or rather through, time freedom, the foundations or basis become transparent right down to the original and pre-conscious pretemporality. So essentially an understanding that there is a inextricable connection between space and time, you will understand that there you go. It's space and time. It's kind of almost tautological. When you understand that space-time are connected, you have unlocked the ability to perceive the world as such. And when you perceive the world as such, you realize, as I have done, at least to an extent, that, oh, there's a new dimension at play here. There's something else. It's not just space. It's not just spatial movements and an empty backdrop of time. That's not what it is. Time solidifies space. Time is space. Think of it like, I remember when I was helping my mom move out of her house, I was cleaning through the garage, and I saw my old bike, and the thing was small. I haven't ridden that since I was like 8 years old. And of course, since it's been that long, it was rusted. It was completely rusted. There was just a ton of rust everywhere. Obviously, because rust has manifested, what does that signal to me? That signals that not only has time passed, but it also has corroded the spatial movement. I would never have been able to understand that without looking at the spatial world, which is to say the rust manifest on the bike. You can't understand time without space, because without space, how does time even manifest? How does it even manifest at all? I don't even understand how that's possible. And you can't understand space without time, because everything spatial, one, appears temporally, whether it be in an originary sense, as in coming into being in a physical sense, or it appears to our consciousness, usually suddenly, or in accordance with some sort of temporal unfolding. These are inextricable. There's just no getting around it. Time freedom, its conscious form, is the fourth dimension. It is an integrative dimension, or, more exactly, it is the amension and not just an expanding or destructive spatial dimension. Remember, an amension retains the same functionality of a dimension, a measurable aspect of the world that is effective and can be measured. It is like that, but it's invisible. That's why it calls it an amension. It's without measurability. So, similar functionality, different form. It is an acategorical element of systatic perception, which makes possible the completion of syneresis, and thus it is the sustaining, indeed a-wearing and transparent, spatially incomprehensible amension. Don't worry, we're going to get into all that later on in the book. That'll be where we ended today. We'll do temporics next week. Do I want to finish up? Yeah, we'll probably finish up temporics next week. We still got a lot of stuff here, bud. We got a lot of good shit here, all right? Don't think that... Now, look what happens next. Huh? Look at that. The natural sciences, baby. The natural sciences. I love it. Mathematics and physics. And we are going to be getting into it, my friend. Look at that. Love it. Love you guys. Thank you guys for being patient. You guys are the best. I am so thankful that you guys have found some value in this. It really means the world to me when you guys tell me that Gebser really changed your life. It's awesome. I love to hear it. And I love you guys so much. I'll see you guys soon. And see you guys next week. Thank you, guys.